And the number one cause of death for a cardiologist, cardiovascular disease. Okay, now that doesn't mean that they don't know anything about the heart, but that definitely means that as a group, as a whole, they don't know much about healing the heart. So it's really important for us to understand that. And if you look at doctors like Dr. Dean Ornish, who published multiple studies in multiple peer-reviewed journals, very respected journals and publications, he literally has been doing things with the whole foods plant-based diet to heal people of not only high blood pressure, but even congestive heart failure and other cardiovascular diseases. So it's really important we get those statistics out of the way first. And then let's go into some risk factors, things that actually cause your blood pressure to be high. So some of those risk factors would be being overweight or obese. So the more adipose tissue you have on the body, the higher your blood pressure. The other thing is a sedentary lifestyle. The less you move. And the reason why this is so important, because today we move much less than our ancestors. You know, our ancestors walked to work. Most of the jobs were actually manual labor jobs. And not only that, most of them were manual labor jobs that were outside. So our ancestors, our great-grandparents, our grandparents were much more better at movement, okay? And we have a much more sedentary lifestyle compared to our grandparents. I mean, you know, everything has changed in the last 50 years. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. But a sedentary lifestyle will increase your blood pressure as well, because life is about movement. I mean, circulating blood through your body is a constant thing. It's happening right now as we speak. And the less you move, the less you circulate, okay? And that is true because the lower half of our body doesn't have a pump like the top half of our body. Our top half has a heart that is pumping the blood. The bottom half doesn't have a pump. So if you don't move, you don't get that blood flowing back up through the veins. So it's important to have movement. Other things, the standard American diet. We'll dive into that a little bit deeper, but the standard American diet is 60 to 70% processed foods. And that processing comes with food chemicals. And a large majority of those food chemicals are things like salt, okay? Not the salt you use with the shaker, but they're putting salt in it to preserve it. And most people don't know how to read food labels, so they don't even know how much salt is in it. And most people eat so much processed food, they're not actually adding it all up throughout the day, so they don't know how much salt they're consuming throughout the day as well, too. And we'll dive a little bit deeper than that, because most people think when you have high blood pressure, it's always attached to you having too much salt in your diet. That's not always the case. Another thing is drinking too much alcohol, stress, taking a lot of NSAIDs. NSAIDs are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. These are like things you can buy over the counter. Advil, ibuprofen, Motrin, naproxen. These are often painkillers that people are using. People use them commonly. Like, I know people who use them daily, if not every other day. And these things will raise your blood pressure. Not only raise your blood pressure, but also kill the good bacteria in your gut, which some of that good bacteria is actually there to help monitor your blood pressure, to keep your blood pressure normal. So that's really important too. Low vitamin D. And roughly 70% of African Americans and people of color have low vitamin D, or at least suboptimal levels. And vitamin D plays a key role in converting an enzyme in the kidneys, because when you get vitamin D, it hits the skin. It has to have magnesium to convert it there. It then has to go through the liver to be converted. That sunlight, when it hits the skin, goes to the liver to be converted. Then it has to go through the kidneys to be converted. And now you have vitamin D, the active form of vitamin D. Well, if you don't have healthy kidneys, as I mentioned before, now you can't convert this, sunlight into vitamin D, the active form, okay? So you can see how having low vitamin D and you won't have this enzyme, now you're gonna have high blood pressure, because now it's gonna start to affect your kidneys as well too, okay? Dysbiosis, that's what I just mentioned before. Dysbiosis is having a lot of bad bacteria in the gut and not enough good, okay? So having dysbiosis in the gut can cause your blood pressure to be high. Also, 1 in 3 patients in the US have kidney disease, and that's 1 in 3 African Americans have kidney disease. That's about 33%. So if we got 3 people here, 1 of them who are African American, 1 of them are gonna have some form of kidney disease. And that is crazy when you think about the fact that African Americans only represent about 12% of the American population, okay? But we represent 33% of kidney disease. Like, that's crazy. So we gotta do something. All right, so let's jump into some things that we need to eliminate. What do we need to eliminate? You gotta eliminate things that are causing stimulation to the body. Things like caffeine, coffee, okay? That will increase your heart rate, which will increase your blood pressure. So eliminate. And not only that, coffee will also be dehydrating to you, and dehydration will dehydrate the kidneys, put more pressure pressure on the kidneys, increase the blood pressure in the body, okay? So getting rid of dehydrating and stimulating beverages like coffee and caffeinated, drinks like energy drinks. Getting rid of processed foods. As I mentioned before, processed foods are relatively a new thing. They didn't really come into play until like the 1950s after World War II, when they were using scientists to create processed foods for the soldiers who were fighting, because one of the big things about wars that they knew was that a lot of the soldiers died not from, being shot, stabbed, or killed. They were dying as a result of malnutrition, okay? So they created a lot of these processed foods so that when they dropped them, they would last long enough, okay? And then they sold that or gave that information to the food industry, and then you have this big boom, processed foods. But ever since that time, the 1950s, you have seen an increase cardiovascular disease. That's when you saw cardiovascular disease become the #1 cause of death in the US, and then later on become the #1 cause of death for human beings in general around the world, okay? And you can go back during that time and you'll see that the American president, Dwight Eisenhower, has a heart attack, and then now they're trying to figure out what is going on with heart disease and cardiovascular disease, because it was a new thing. It wasn't this thing that was common as it is today, okay? So getting rid of processed foods, a lot of these man-made foods is a big thing, okay? Eating more whole foods, foods that have one ingredients, an avocado, kale, etc. Getting rid of those NSAIDs that I talked about before, the Motrin, the Advil, naproxen, etc. Those things raise your blood pressure, and using some more natural options, or correcting the issue, okay? Stress, managing stress. Now that you can't completely eliminate stress, but you can manage stress, because stress does increase your blood pressure. Also, removing white flour and refined carbohydrates. The reason why this one is so important is because white flour, refined carbohydrates increase insulin in the body, okay? And now, when people think about insulin, they think about diabetes. They don't think about high blood pressure, but here's why this is important. Increases in insulin will increase blood pressure. Why is that? Because an increase in insulin causes renal sodium to be reabsorbed. So you absorb more of that salt, sodium, salt, okay? You absorb more of that salt back into the body, okay? So that's the first thing. The other thing is, when you increase insulin, it will activate your sympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight nervous system in your body, making you more jittery, more active, okay? You want to be chill, okay? But if you eat a lot of refined carbohydrates, a lot of white flour, it's going to increase your insulin, which is going to stimulate your sympathetic nervous system, make you more excited, okay?